Okay, this is Michael Bendner, author of Musings from the Christian Left. This is one of the many articles we have on abortion. This one, though, was written just after the Alito Draft was released, or the Friday night thereof, because there's nothing on TV on a Friday night. So the irony of the Alito Draft on Jackson versus Jackson Women's Health versus Dobbs is that while citing the fact that Plessy versus Ferguson is an example of the Supreme Court opinion where the court changed its mind, his opinion would essentially start the process of bringing Plessy area jurisprudence back to life. So by citing Plessy, he brings Plessy back, which is crazy. The whole point of Plessy was not separation of the races, as much as the judicial theory that the various states are competent to judge their own compliance with the 14th Amendment. Paging Franz Kafka, total truth speak. Paging George Orwell. A year ago, I suggested the text for such an opinion as in the Alito Draft. I'd written Scalia in the original blog post. That's a Freudian slip, and the chat will have the link. For years, both sides of the abortion debate have used the issue for political advantage. There are now generations of people who are committed to the arguments. There are volunteer lists and funding streams on each side in every state. It's time to end this. Indeed, Justice Alito has given us no choice. Even if Justice Gorsuch saves the conservatives on the court from themselves, there is no going back from the current brink. We must find a way forward to a long-term solution. Our polity must be disinfected. In 2009, the Catholic bishops attacked the mythical Freedom of Choice Act, even though President Obama had offered during the second debate to sit down and work out how to deal with the problem of late-term abortion. He didn't like it either. I mean, it's the options are not good, except maybe one. We'll talk about that. If Secretary Clinton had taken the same tack rather than defending partial birth abortion, and I still think that Russia hacked her briefing book, and that the Catholic bishops knew this, Trump would not have been president, and the old status quo would continue because there wouldn't be an Alito wing of the court. Jackson changed that. Combined with the emerging truth on the insurrection and Trump's involvement with Putin on Ukraine, he was likely bribed through donations from Moscow to his super PAC through Lev, Igor, and Rudy. And I've talked about that in another episode. The GOP may just cease to exist. The Conservative Party in the U.S. has failed twice before, both the Federalists and the Whigs. The Federalists were stale, and the Whigs were unable to come to some consensus about slavery. 2022 will not be a good year for the GOP. No amount of capitalist sabotage over the airwaves can save it either. The Freedom of Choice Act may be passed this year, for real this time. Hasn't been so far, but backlash is yet to be begun. If the Alito opinion in any form becomes the opinion of the court. If it is not passed before the election, it will certainly be passed by large majorities in 2023. The only play the GOP can make to stay alive is to pass some form of FOCA on a bipartisan basis. It must also punish the leaders of the insurrection caucus within its congressional caucus, while those who voted with them in the wee hours of the morning of January 7th, which was disgraceful after an insurrection, should accept censure. I mean, was just no excuse for that. Their people probably weren't even watching. They should have just, done it and be done with it instead of dragging it out. In 2023, it will have to beg for bipartisanship. The Democrats should remember that they will one day be in the minority and should welcome some kind of joint solution. The reason there are so many pro-life judges on the bench, including the Fifth Circuit that let what was then Dobbs pass, was the flirtation it had with the nuclear option and with ending the filibuster. Every time the Democrats wanted to change the rules and pass the current agenda, the Republicans used the same rules to do permanent harm. Insanity is doing the same thing year after year and expecting a different result. Require that the only legal form of abortion after 20 weeks, require that any legal abortion after 20 weeks is induction. No one has an abortion after this point that is not medically necessary. Demonizing women who do this makes no friends in the pro-life movement. Fetal hospice is much more preferable to the more gruesome methods like dilation and curettage and dilation and extraction, also known as D&C and DNX. And by the way, miscarriages are cleaned up by dilation and curettage, so basically it's D&C either way. The question is the status of the fetus at the time, but if you go just try to ban D&Cs, then you've really hurt reproductive health, because women will die if they can't get a D&C when they've had a miscarriage. They'll be bleeding and hemorrhaging and nasty results. So you can't ban that procedure. Agree that only Congress can set the boundary where the child is protected under the law. The United States tried to deal with slavery by letting states choose to be stipend-free. That did not work out so well. Sending the matter back to the states would repeat this error. Alito's position is not only bad for women, it is bad for national harmony. It would make the existing problem worse. Because there is a problem of bad blood between the parties, although that was really exacerbated by the Republicans, chasing the Catholics and, almost ruining the Catholic Church too. Termination before such a boundary are forever a matter between a woman and her doctor. So, again, the logic of this opinion is that a child is not legally recognized. If the child is not legally recognized, the right of privacy must be respected. Unless and privacy isn't confidentiality. It's the right to be left alone by the moral mob. Especially for women. After that boundary, pregnancies would have to be registered. All pregnancies, just as we register stillbirth and live births. Unless if you're going to investigate pregnancies and they're ending, you've got to know that the pregnancies have happened, which means registration. People legally who have legality are registered, unless they're undocumented minors. But they theoretically should be. They don't have status. If you want to give status to somebody, their name has to be on the list. Having to do so should give the pro-life movement pause. To actually treat a pregnancy as a person will affect every pregnant woman and her family. Likewise, all lost pregnancies after a legal boundary of personhood would have to be investigated as a homicide, even if it's only a chart review by the coroner. This may extend to in-person investigation by law enforcement. Such investigation shocks the conscience of any family or couple who has suffered a miscarriage. Calling a fetus a person has consequences. To really do that is not easy, and to not do so thwarts the argument that legal protection must be provided to the unborn. In other words, if it's not a person, you can't regulate the procedure. If it is a person, then you have to do certain things to make personhood a thing. Between 2/3 and 3/4 of abortions are done because of economic or life impacts of the mother and her family or partner. To stop abortion and even demolish its infrastructure, these causes must be ameliorated, meaning countered. This means higher wages, higher refundable child tax credits, better child care, and paid family medical leave. Now, for late-term Downs children, this means respite care for parents and lifetime disability income and case management services for the children, and that income must be adequate. Since they don't work, they don't get the higher SSDI, so SSI needs to be enough. In other words, alleviate the fears that families have, fears that are quite reasonable after all. All this is best enacted this year. Indeed, the president needs to shame the bishops into calling economic justice for families a pro-life issue. No one deserves a perfect pro-life record if they do not take care of families, not just helping out with pregnancies and offering adoption to compliant Catholic couples. It's how they reward them for being pro-life. They give them, a baby of somebody who isn't able to take care of them or who's been ripped from their drug-addled mother, which happens. That's where a lot of foster kids come from. That's kidnapping in my view. Not provide such subsidies and ban abortion is not only shameful, it is evil. Doing so is considered a sin that cries to heaven for justice, because that's what not giving people an adequate income is. It is a sin that cries to heaven for justice. To use the poor is a sin that cries to heaven for vengeance. Indeed, not funding families adequately, as identified in Catholic doctrine, is intrinsically evil. You can look that up. It's in doctrine. I wrote a book about it, about the papal anachronists. So there are many Republicans among the working poor. They need the help. Helping them should be bipartisan. This is the only way to get it done, and the only way the GOP can survive in its present form. So let's build back better, and also let's make that argument that the court will listen to. So, which means we have to be loud and make sense. We just can't say it's a woman's right and we're displeased. That does not move the court. We have to actually give them a reason to write something different than repealing Roe. So that's what I have for today on this issue. Thanks for listening. Congratulations if you made it this far.